Welcome to the AI Ireland podcast, your window into the world of AI innovation on the island of Ireland. Join us as we explore how AI is harnessed to tackle both business and societal challenges, revealing the cutting-edge solutions emerging from this vibrant AI community. Don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates and insights in the world of AI. Hello everyone, it's Mark Kelly here. I hope you are well wherever you are today. And we have got another episode of the AI Ireland podcast, and I'm very, very happy to welcome Stephen Fleming to us. Stephen is founder of Voxxify. Stephen, thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Great to meet you.
So we're going to find out a little bit about Voxxify and the problem that you and the team help solve for customers. But it'd be great just to hear a little about your journey, how you got into this kind of world of kind of data science and AI and using this as a technology, as an enabler to help customers. And then also how the company kind of came about.
Yeah, great. So I've been an IT guy for a long time since, I did engineering at UCC. Ended up working in American Airlines in Dallas, programming the reservation system. So I've had a long career in IT and being able to see some of the challenges people have working with IT from the inside out. Most recently, around about 2010, I worked for EMC, which is now Dell, focused on helping our internal employees or internal IT customers be more productive with IT. So my role was to try and go and figure out what actually do people need. And what is people's sentiment about the tools that IT is producing. So it was really trying to treat, internal users as customers and taking a product management approach. And what I discovered was there was a huge gap between what IT was able to understand about end users' needs and what end users actually wanted. And some of the traditional ways IT was making decisions really was looking at external research, looking at what the trends in the market were, and a bit of like, here's how IT has always done it, so let's continue doing it that way. And what I wanted to do was kind of, in a way, invert the pyramid and see, well, if we were able to get feedback from across the entire business, from every single end user, and have some way to analyze that data, we'd have a better way of knowing what tools to give people. And then we'd have a way of measuring that. So we were able to demonstrate that we were able to improve the outcomes for those people. When you're doing that in an organization of 140,000 people at the time from Cork, a global organization, it's quite challenging. And I had quite a large team of developers, analysts, product managers, people like that, trying to figure this out using fairly manual methods. We had some kind of a survey. We had a way to go and develop customer personas by flying around the world and interviewing people and writing those down in a piece of paper. But ultimately, it became quite slow, quite labor intensive. And some of the techniques that we had to employ, to be able to understand sentiment and to be able to understand verbatim feedback from people, they were quite immature at the time. So, we did that quite successfully within Dell, but it occurred to me, the best way to do this was actually to take it outside, put it into the cloud, apply AI machine learning to that problem, and thereby, speed up the workflow, be able to offer it to a larger number of, organizations, and within that, gather benchmarks from the industry, and just, to be able to scale it and get past the kind of people problem that you run into when you're dealing with this amount of data.
And so because it's very easy to say, these are the trends, these are the bigger ticket items as a business, let's allocate resources, let's go try to solve these problems. But I think we've seen from businesses, if you figure out the wrong problem to solve and you do it perfectly well, it's a really big waste of time for resources. Customers are kind of going like, doesn't really move the dial. And then internally, got low morale as well. So it's trying to get those nuances of that kind of what's in that verbatim feedback that's actually the real issue, rather than these are more surface level, rather than actually what's necessarily causing that as well. So you're kind of getting that sentiment, and this was enough of a scratch for you to itch to set up the business.
Yeah, it was, and it was, it felt like it was a problem. So I had been, in front of customers saying, this is the Dell story, this is how we do it internally. You should do that as well. Maybe Dell would offer services around it. But I was beginning to get a sense that this was a wider problem across the organization. And speaking to customers, very few of them were doing anything around this. if at all. Some IT departments were sending out very small, little survey monkeys, whatever you have, but most of the decision was made in a fairly traditional way, isolated from the end users. And if we were to ask IT professionals, particularly kind of in, end user productivity tools was in those days was known as infrastructure. So if you ask the people in the infrastructure services, how do they feel, did they have any way to get feedback from the business? They kind of gave the sense of, well, that's not really relevant to us. And then if you reframe the question and say, has there ever been a situation where you've spent tens of millions of dollars over 2 or 3 years putting in a big system for the business, handing it over to them at the end, only for them to say, either we didn't want that at all, or that's fine, but that's like our 10th priority. And so when you ask them that question, they'll all come back and say, yeah, the business just haven't a clue what we're at. And so this is the way of turning it around, saying if you go out and get very granular data and you're able to analyze it correctly, then you can avoid, making that mistake 3 years in advance. You're always dealing with up-to-date data. And if you've got techniques whereby you can prioritize in a statistical or a reliable way what the business cares about, then when you deliver services to them, they will automatically recognize those as the things that are solving their problems.
Yeah, because they're gonna come to the meetings more engaged. They're gonna start to open and respond faster to your emails. It's gonna be less of an issue trying to push them towards something because they want that problem solved, and you're kind of speaking the same love language when you're engaged them. So with Voxxify, you're looking to try to make sense of the data, offering more kind of tailored services, and then you're kind of removing the complexity, which then is going to improve customer service, right? That kind of user experience kind of comes together then.
Yeah, so for the end user, ultimately they get a better product. But for IT, actually, a lot of the IT is kind of introverted as an organization. And so they like data, they like technology. They don't necessarily like talking to people around the business. And so often, what we kind of do is almost a translation service. And again, my experience in IT, making executive presentations to, the CIO and, CIO's boss within a company the size of Dell, I was able to kind of hone my skill set around how do we ask the right questions, how do we analyze that data, and how do we present that in a way that IT can very quickly see what is the problem, what do we need to do about it, and when do we need to do it. And so by the time I got to, setting up the company, I had a pretty good idea of what the end product should look like in terms of, what data will move the dial from an IT decision maker and a business decision maker. And then the next question was, well, okay, what tools are available? At that stage, I didn't really know much about AI or ML. I knew it was a thing. I knew it was a way to process large amounts of data. And I figured, it's probably the only way to make something like this scale. So it was really trying to put that together to say, starting from the end result backwards, how do I design a survey to get data, to feed some kind of machine language algorithm that can be really, really effective at processing that data into a dashboard that IT can just look at. And that was the scale of the problem.
And we're going to go into the weeds a bit. We're living in this world now of open source models versus closed source. That's changing. It feels like every 48 hours in terms of leaders, which is getting the biggest impact, the costs. We really don't know which way it's going to go. How did you kind of choose those models, and what's your kind of process to kind of utilizing what's best out there, but also trying to stay relevant because people's shifts and trends can impact your business, not to mention your customers?
Yeah, so I think, with something like AI and ML, you really need to have a point of view on what you want to get out about it and what the gives and takes are around that. Actually, one of the first things I learned about, if I take a step back, when I first heard about, Azure or something like that, having these inference models available that you could just log into and throw your data at it, I threw a large data set at it, just personal it was actually sports data that I threw at it and thought it would just magically produce the results for me. And obviously it doesn't. So I did a bit of learning on that. And the learning was your feature selection is the most important thing. So if you're a surfer, if anyone's watching the Olympics and the surfing, the people who score the highest points choose the best waves. So that's like feature selection. If you choose the correct features, then you're going to get a better outcome. So that really led me, number one, to start to understand, well, how should I structure data? What data is important to capture at the first point? Secondly, then actually, this was really, really helpful, was that Stanford has two Nobel laureates in the field of statistics. They published a series of videos about statistical learning or machine learning online that anybody could watch. So I watched those over and over and over again to start to see what kind of outputs you could get from AI. And then I started to pick some of those that really, really suited the data and the outcomes that I needed. So things like regression analysis solved a problem that we had, which was what is the most important, amongst a series of, sentiment ratings. We could understand what was good, what was bad, but one of the challenges was, well, what's more important so that we could help, IT teams prioritize. That was where regression analysis comes in. Another challenge was creating personas. So instead of flying around the world, meeting people, interviewing them, creating paper documents that were very quickly out of date, understanding what were the different dimensions that were unique to different personas and using cluster analysis to build up those personas automatically. So now we have dynamic personas that adjust over time with an organization. We can almost blueprint an organization. And then things like natural language processing. We got a lot of verbatim comments, from a single survey. We'll have thousands and thousands of comments, which, previously, with a manual team, you comb through them. You end up kind of cherry picking comments that you think are representative of the data. But natural language processing allows you to identify, products or keywords in that data without training it. Allows us to do sentiment analysis, allows us to do emotion classification, allows us to translate from any language into English. There's a whole raft of different individual techniques, which when you piece them together, gradually break down the problem and give us the output we wanted.
Which is really interesting because you've got this data set, nice clean data set, but then you can then build it out and synthesize it out further. So I kind of use the example of, let's say you've got a focus group of 50 people across America. You can start to say, well, I want to 10x that, but I want to know their deepest, darkest thoughts about our product or service. Let's flesh this out a bit more, and then you keep iterating, working within it, and suddenly you're starting to figure out different people's problems or solutions to them, working within something that you're very purposeful in growing and creating. So your foundation is your strong data that you have, but you're not necessarily going off. Now, again, it's off track in terms of the example, but Medina came up with the COVID vaccine within 48 hours based on a lot of that trial and error that they were actually choosing the vaccine. And they're arguably within the top three of vaccines that have been very, very successful. So it's funny how there might be more of a push now for this, because we're getting into this world of small language models. We have kind of Meta, Microsoft, OpenAI, these kind of mini models, which cost a lot less, more secure, finite data set. And again, you're training it on your own kind of proprietary data as well. But then you can also have it on device, so it doesn't have to go on the cloud. So this is obviously going to be very interesting for businesses and how that's going to be leveraged.
So ML and AI models have been open source for a long time. And actually some of the models, like the kind of paper and pen models that underpin those, are from the 50s and 60s. They're old-fashioned statistics. Like, we've got a book in our library called Psychometric Analysis, I think it's called, written by a guy called Alan Nunali in about 1972. And I flick through that and you can see great survey scales, you can see regression analysis, you can see cluster analysis. But back then, compute was about 1 trillion times more expensive, so you just couldn't do what we can do now. And right now, we've got these massive models. So, over time, and starting to come into when I founded the company 5 years ago, there were open source models in R that we could use to develop stuff. There was open source stuff in Python. All these, relatively specific, what they used to call kind of weak AI, but it's very specific AI models. Now with the advent of LLMs, obviously everyone knows OpenAI, ChatGPT really kind of started the gold rush in terms of people understanding what AI can do generally. And so that's a really great. I actually was speaking to a very large VC in New York last year, saying, "Hey, listen, right now we're using OpenAI for something. We want to come off that and move to our own self-hosted model." And they were kind of saying, "Yeah, it's great to have something like that to prove out your concept initially at a low cost, but once you get enough data, you can then take one of these Llama models and one of these other open source models." And something that Mark Zuckerberg has talked about is taking this large 405 billion parameter large language, Llama 3, and using it to train a smaller model, which you can then self-host on a very specific use case. So, one of the things for us with OpenAI is it's extremely convenient. We can send it, redacted data so that when we send it anything, it's really, really safe. And we're not sharing any data that they're going to be training their model on. But it helps us build out that early version of a product. And then when we get into an enterprise use case where the customer really wants to make sure they know where all that data is, and they want to make sure that we're not training models on their data, we can take this large Llama model, train a very, very small specific model just on what we use it for, and then everything is contained within our walled garden, so to speak. But as you said, there's an explosion in open source stuff. It's changing so fast. So one of the challenges for companies is just trying to keep up with the pace of change and knowing when is the right moment actually to make the switch from a service that you've managed to secure to a service that you fully own.
Yeah, and I genuinely wouldn't know when that would be. There's so many changes happening at any one time, but people are interested in the security aspect, non-infringing on their data rights. It's done ethically well, and then the costings of that, and then you're very thoughtful, you're very transparent, you're managing through all those different areas. And once customers see that kind of bumper sticker for trust and all the other boxes are ticked, they're going to have a lot more confidence around doing that. So it's going to be interesting to see how the next 6 months play out and go. Kind of finally, just trends with kind of customers, personalization, getting kind of closer to the problems that they want solved. It seems like the bar is now kind of raised now, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you said a great thing there about getting closer to the problems that customers want solved. We are very intentionally, and also part of our DNA is being very customer focused. So everything we do is it's focused around the customer, what the customer needs. We're not always customer led in the sense that we wait for the customer to ask us to do something and then go build it. We're trying to be, a couple of steps ahead of where the customer's head is in terms of a solution, but be 100% focused on what the customer's problems are. And that actually will help us figure out when is the right point to move to a fully self-hosted, open source, very specific small language model. So the customer will lead us on that, or at least when we get to a problem, or get to a situation where it actually works better for everybody if we move to this other model, it'll be a pretty clear inflection point for us because something will push us down that direction.
I think there's going to be a significant point where you actually go, yeah, we're going to jump off and catch that wave because we see this is enough now to justify doing that. There seems like there's a lot of value out there for customers at the moment. It's just trying to help navigate which one you need to go on and spend more time on rather than not. And over the next 6 to 9 months, I see that interface or user experience becoming a lot more straightforward for customers to use. But it's like everything, it's just getting that out into the openness that people start to see, oh, actually, that is really, really beneficial to my business. That's going to solve this problem for my business. And that's going to give me higher net promoter score, or it's going to allow our people to be more productive, or whatever that is. And those use cases come true.
I was going to say one other thing, which is the pros and cons of LLMs. The pro of these LLMs is that now everyone is aware of AI and the benefits of AI, and it's not some abstract thing, it's tangible benefits. And the cons of it are, I think people conflate LLM with AI, and there's a whole lot of other models. So, if I was giving advice to businesses on, getting involved with with the AI. It's starting with what problem do you have to solve, finding somebody who's knowledgeable about it, and then saying, what are the right tools for the job? So, we've got 20 different AI models, only one of which uses an LLM. So there's a whole lot of other stuff that happens before you get to an LLM. And I think it's really important as we go forward that you don't get caught up just in the hype of the generative side of it, but actually look, thoughtfully across the whole suite of AI models and see what works for you. And within that context as well, the UI side of it. So, I think you shared a video. You shared two things actually recently that I think are really useful for people to watch in terms of informing their position. One is the EU AI Act, which is your AI should declare that it's an AI so people know it's an AI. But on the other hand, the AIs are becoming superhuman-like. So even though it might be wearing a big T-shirt saying, I am an AI, but it looks like a person walking down the street, which part of your brain is gonna respond to that? So it'll be very interesting to thread the needle between those two sides, I think.
Yeah, and just on your point, and it is really, really good. You mentioned that there was 20 and one have got LLM. Even if you just started off small with statistics and fleshing it out to regression and seeing how it go on that journey, you will learn so much more. And it's kind of like the Swiss Army knife: is what do you need, or that golf bag, what do you need to solve that problem at any one time. And ultimately what it's going to come down to is the employee experience and the customer experience. And are you going to improve either one of those by your approach? And what's going to have the biggest impact with the least amount of costs in terms of either time or resources, and then not get in the way, right? Because it's very easy to get in the way and overthink these things as well. But you're ultimately just trying to come up with a solution that's making people more productive at what they need to do to achieve their goals. And this is probably where I think the AI Ireland podcast or the AI Awards won't be a thing in the years to come, because it's just going to be breathing water or breathing air and drinking water, and it becomes just one of those things anyway. Steve Fleming, CEO of Voxxify, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Mark.
On the 26th of November, join us for the 6th Annual AI Awards at the Marco Hotel in Dublin. This year's event promises to be our largest and most impressive yet, with over 300 community members in attendance and over 48 applications of AI in action. This truly is an incredible world-class event, and we are inviting you to this event. Experience the excitement live, because we're going to be capturing this with a world-class film crew, and it's going to be streamed online. However, if you want to join us in person, book your table now, because opportunities are limited. If you're interested in sponsoring this year's awards, please contact me at Mark@AI Awards for more information and see the best in class of AI applications on the island of Ireland.